All right, so we're beginning chapter 6, and I want to emphasize chapter 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The chapter material isn't as large as some of the earlier chapters, and we're working on building specific structures. And just like Legos, where we have a 2x4 structure, a 2x3 structure, we have the little blocks. How we put these blocks together can get really complicated. And so the idea of looping and how we loop really creates some many different things we can build. What we're going to see in methods gives us a lot of flexibility and different ways we can set up our programs. And we'll see arrays give us a different way of arranging memory so that we can process things differently. And then when we end with objects, then object is a container that can kind of hold all of these things together to make them workable for what we need to do. So I'm going to go through the slides in the book, and I'm going to start with the opening problem. We worked for having a for loop that we could sum up all of the numbers between two values. We could count our ways from 1 to 10 and add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. And we could really make 3 loops that did 3 sums. So if we look at what we have here, I set some value for the sum, I loop through, and I start with a minimum value of 1 and I will go to a maximum value of 10, and I'll add each number into my sum, and I'll print out the result when the for loop is done. I reset sum equal to 0, and I rechange the min and the max, and I loop through and add that number into the sum, and I print out the result. And I do it one more time, changing it here. And the book does a good job of pointing out this code here that we repeat is almost the same. The only thing different are these min and max values here. This 1 and 10, this 20 and 30, this 35 and 45. And so we want to have some way of being able to repeat code. In general, if you type the exact same thing in more than a couple of times, we should have a structure that will reference that code. So we don't have to keep typing the same commands over or the same statements over and over again. And the structure that we're going to have is called a method. Now, in some programming languages, they call method functions. And in other programming languages, they call methods subroutines or methods. So it is a collection of code that gets repeated, and we can reference it. And we'll look deeper as we go into the chapter at how this is handled in memory and some important considerations for it. What we're going to do here is we're going to take this idea of this program, and we're going to write a method that repeats this code. Now I'm going to go to my all windows here, so I apologize for the infinity. It's kind of neat watching my mouse dance around like that. All right, I'll stop that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I'm going to create a new Java project for all of my chapter 6 material. I'm going to use the project folder as the root for the source and class files. And I'm going to create that. And what I'm going to come here is I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call it adder. And we're going to use public static void main. Do I have any other package options? No, I don't have any other package options, so I'll use the default package for now. And what we're going to do here, I'm not going to get any input from the user, but I'm going to do something up here, and I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call it public static, and I'm going to want it to return an integer. So I'm going to call it an integer, and I'm going to give it the name sum, and it's going to take in an integer for for my minimum value and an integer for my maximum value. Then I'm going to give braces. So this section of code up here that's going to be in sum is going to be separate from main. It's going to be a chunk of code I'm going to write that I can reference by its name. And we'll look at how the name works. And so I'm going to create my for loop. I'm going to have integer I equals the minimum value that I have listed here. And I'm going to make sure that I is less than or equal to the maximum value. And I'm going to increase I by 1. And what did I need to do? I need to make an integer for the sum. And I'm going to start that equaling 0. And so sum will equal whatever's inside of it plus whatever number I'm looping my way through. And when I'm done, I have to return from outside of this method, and I'm going to return it the value of sum. So I've created a structure here that this first part says I will return an integer. The second part names it and says it's accepting in 2 integers, one for the minimum value and one for the maximum value. And then it has a chunk of code that it repeats, and that repetition is that pieces of code that were the same. So the only thing difference is these min and max values. In fact, if we go back here and look at the PowerPoint, I've created a chunk of code that looks like this for loop here. The only difference is the min and max values. So get back into Eclipse. And so to use this in my program, I need to reference the name. So notice I'm down in main. Main is what's going to run. Let me drag my window down a little bit. And I'm going to do all 3 versions. So I'm going to go system.out.printf, the sum of the integers between %d and %d is %d. I'm going to hit return here. So I'm using my printf, and the first one was between 1 and 10. So I'm going to print out 1 and 10. But now I need to do the sum between 1 and 10. So instead of writing the for loop on its own, I send 1 and 10 to the method I wrote. So I reference the name and I give it 2 integers. And now I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, I need a %n here so it's on a new line. I always forget those with printfs. Sorry about that. And I'll say the sum of the integers between %d and %d is %d / n. Give my comma. And what were the other numbers that we were going through? 20 and 37. So I'll give it 20 and 37. And I'll send to sum 20 and 37. And the last time, I'll printf, and I'll say the sum of the integers between %d and %d is %d / n. I'll give a return statement here. And what was the last one I needed to do? I needed to do it between the numbers 35 and 49. So we'll give it 35 and 49. We'll send that 35 and 49 to sum. And so now I'll run this. And now I get 3 sums, but I only had to write the code once for these sums. And so that in a nutshell is the idea of a method. We take any code that is repeated and we put it in its own little space, and we call that repeated code from inside of our other programs or other methods. And so this sum here will return an integer, one given 2 integers, and I can call it from within here by its name so that I don't have to repeat typing in this code. So that's the idea of what we're doing in chapter 6. I will pause this video and we'll start breaking apart what a method needs to work.